the so many good things he has done, because I would say there are many, you have to give him credit for the fact that probably in his own interest to create a lethal fighting force, which the UPDF is, he was able to allow the UPDF to recruit people, very serious professionals, highly educated people. They are highly trained. So you have a very dynamic lethal fighting force with effective command and control. So in terms of the military, the way it is now, that's the kind of military you would need for the country. The problem is that Museveni does not look at this as your military. He looks at it as his military. And you can find all the evidence that you need to find to just confirm that. That's why you also realize that in the recent past, if you go backwards, you will see right from 2016. 2016, that's when he had one of the most formidable challenges in the electoral process. In the light of the work that was done under TDA and a very formidable campaign from Chiza Besigye, Museveni, I think, felt like his hold on power was kind of like slipping away. You remember how he deployed the military, especially in Kampala. After the elections, Kampala was like there had been a coup. So as he has aged and the dissent has grown, Museveni has been retreating from the general public. If he cannot buy you and give you the goodies, he knows that he has to rely on the military. So all that he has now are elements within the UPDF that are able to control the military. So you have a very professional force made of professional people, very highly trained people that is controlled. And that's the control that matters as far as I'm concerned. So we can talk about so many things about what we are able to do. You have to go back to the military. So your focus, Reagan, on the implementation of the Supreme Court decision, as I said, for me, that's a post-mortem. The second point that I would want to make is that you need to see how Museveni insists on controlling the UPDF. Right from 1992, when the UPDF when the NRA statute was enacted, that's where they insisted on including the members of the NRA High Command in the NRA statute. That's 1992. While we were supposed to legislate a national army, Museveni's government and his people insisted that the members of the NRA High Command, as they existed on the 26th of January 1986, had to be included in the members of the High Command as created by the NRA statute. The other category that they included is the senior officers of the NRA as at 26th January 1986. They are there, including people like General Mugisha Muntu, who never attend those meetings because they are now not in the government. So that is 1992. In 2003 and 2005, when the UPDF bill was being debated, the same debate was there on, do you have to include those people of the Bush War, to include them in the registration? There was a spirited defense from Amama Mbabazi and Museveni's people to make sure that the same group was included in the 2005 UPDF Act. Oh, I have left a third category, by the way. The NRA High Command, as it existed at January 26th, 1986, the senior officers of the NRA, as they were on 26th January 1986. The third category was the representatives of the rebel movements. That is the most astounding one. that groups like NRM, UPA, Fronasa, Chikos Marum, they are all listed there in the law. That the representatives of those the representatives of the political movements of those groups were also included in the law as part of the high command. So you come 2005, when we are supposed to be discussing a new dispensation under the constitution, they still insist those groups are there. So it's quite shocking. I don't know what's wrong with us as Ugandans, that even in the current amendment, the one that is before Parliament, which they are now talking about, the same groups are kept there. In the 2005 debate, Kahindo Tafire made a very interesting submission about why that group needed to be there. Basically, implicitly saying that this is our army, we created it, we needed to look after it and nurture it. But now, if you think of 1981, when they started, 1986, when they took over power, then 1995, when we had the new constitution, now you are in 2025. The same group says we have to be in the high command. That shows you how Ugandans have not had an army. The UPDF remains the NRI as it was conceived in 1981, as it was conceived. That's how it has remained. At least its control still rests with Museveni as the commander in chief and the founder of the rebel group. If you look at the structures, even when they are very genuine men and women in the UPDF who have tried to revolutionize the army, those of you who have seen the UPDF establishment, it's a very elaborate document on how the army is organized. There are two things that you need to realize, especially for people like Goret who are in Parliament who are going to be discussing this law. There are two important things. The first one is that in the UPDF establishment, you will not find there a very clear, you won't find very clear principles that deal with the subordination of the military to civilian authority. That is one of the fundamental principles under the constitution, that the military shall be subordinate to civilian authority. So both in the law and the administrative documents or policy documents like this, the UPDF establishment, that principle does not come out at all. Number two, what I think is most frustrating for me is that you can see consistently right from 1997, when Mohozi was recruiting students into the army, and Museveni was claiming these are just LDUs. You can see structurally, Museveni has been almost engaged in a very choreographed process to hand over the UPDF to his son. That is clearly evident from the way he is trying to implement the UPDF establishment. Incidentally, you have to give credit to the people who did the UPDF establishment, because it's a very elaborate way of presentation of the UPDF as the military that it should be. But when you begin to see the implementation operationally, including in the amendment bill, you can see this is a man who has clarity that the army has to be controlled by either someone who is his son now in charge or someone whom he wants to control. So the UPDF as conceived now, as being the way the bill is being structured now, or the bill that is before Parliament right now, you can see that the UPDF is a completely separate government, controlled outside the civilian authority. And what that means is that it will be the authority because they control the means of violence, So it doesn't matter who will be the president, by the way. You can be president, you will have no authority at all because of the way the UPDF is being reconfigured. Whoever controls the UPDF as the chief of defense forces will actually be the president in real terms. That if the UPDF disagrees with you, you are out of that office, whether you have been elected or not. That's immaterial. So I think that's where we need to look at. The civil society, does it, how does civil society? No, I think Ugandans, we're also always keen to just throw these ideas to civil society. If I think of civil society as organized groups, then yes. But in most cases, when we talk about civil society, we are like talking about NGOs, the many NGOs that are around. I have argued time and again that the problem of Uganda as we have now is that we have never had a national army. Almost every army that we have had since the colonial times has been controlled by someone. Right now, the UPDF as it is controlled by Mr. Museveni, who is the president, who is the commander in chief, and the founder of the rebel group that has mutated into the UPDF. And with that, with the UPDF, he has been able to capture and control and redirect the institutions of state. And in actually even demobilize them. The incident that Goretti is describing of abducting their candidate for Kawempe, the electoral commission has no capacity to control that process at all. That's a military operation. So sometimes these guys in the electoral commission, including our friend Byabakama, they will be there posturing and pretending like they are in charge, but they are in charge of nothing. So we need to appreciate that what Museveni has done is to be able to capture and demobilize institutions of state and concentrate the power in himself using the military. So our single most important challenge as citizens is how do we liberate the state from this capture. So while the NRA was liberating the state from the bad armies or from the bad leadership, the mission of our generation is how do we liberate the state from the capture by Museveni and his group. Now that is not a task that can be done by one group, or whether it is MPs or opposition political parties. I call the task that we have is the one that can only be executed through what I call collective citizen resistance. That Ugandans will have to reach a certain level of consciousness that in our different citizen formations, whether you consider yourself civil society, whether you consider yourselves farmers or professional bodies like the Law Society, the Medical Association, the engineers and others, economic formations like cooperatives and other groups, cultural institutions like these kingdoms, because everybody has been captured and immobilized until we reach a certain level of civic consciousness as citizens formations to be able to work together, and we cannot overcome this kind of this kind of capture that we are in. So my sister Gorette, besides focusing on the elections right now, the one important contribution that NUP and all of us can do is how do
Foi ba foi dana duje foi maral to.
Garrity is what I cannot understand. But right now, that group called the NRM caucus is one of the biggest dangers that we have as as a country, because the role of the parliament as the legislative organ, as an oversight organ over the conduct of the executive and the judiciary, has completely been eroded because of, and there are only There are only two reasons that they have been eroded, because those MPs, they are not different from each one of us as citizens, because the MPs, they are ruled by fear and they love for money. That if the president can give them money and then
very much, Regan, for the opportunity. I would like to thank the speakers of the day. Now, what I'm going to share maybe is very brief and to speak to this entire idea of militarization of politics in Uganda. I think it was the Human Rights and Peace Center at School of Law in Makerere that released a report. I think that was titled Guns, Bread and Butter. And in that report, they shared the scope and extent to which almost all spheres of life, all aspects of life in Uganda have been dominated by the armed people. From the lake fisheries to ministries as PSAs, to the police, to engineering, they're being given construction contracts. So it speaks so much. I would, for anybody that would love to maybe appreciate this particular topic better, I would urge them to go and look for that report. Now, what I wanted to add on to that was there's a book called The Machiavellians, and The Machiavellians is a book that talks about the iron law of oligarchy. And basically, this law speaks to the idea that we will always end up being ruled by an elite of some kind. And in this case, it's the armed people that have constituted the elite that is leading us. And Museveni has taken his time, and he has been so gradual and cautious in making sure that this comes to fruition. And so this law speaks to the fact that all forms of organizations, regardless of how democratic they may be at the start, just like the NRM government seemed at the start in 1986, will eventually and inevitably develop oligarchic tendencies, which makes true democracy practically and theoretically impossible. And so this then poses the question that speaks to today's topic of governance, I think, and security, if I remember. And so I would conclude by saying that democracy is fake, really, that there will always be an elite ruling class, and that elite ruling class seems to be the army as is. And for amendments to be made to this act is basically to fortify and concretize that. Why so? I would think that it's because the masses can't organize. So since the majority can't organize, only the minority can organize, and it seems so clear what the minority is in this case. And so I don't see, I don't know Museveni for being a guy that simply withdraws bill from parliament. Whatever is in the kitchen and is being cooked, I don't think it will be good news to Ugandans. But we all hope for the best, and we hope that the honorables that are sharing are going to talk about this bill, deliberate over it in parliament, will share Ugandans' views, regardless of being the minority, and the majority will take the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Agaba. For the interest of time, we shall use the last 10 minutes to get closing statements. I will invite you, Mr. Honorable Namuga, to use your 5 minutes to give us your closing remarks, and then I will invite Mr. Godbat also give us his closing remarks in 5 minutes. Let's keep it brief and utilize the 5 minutes for closing remarks. Over to you, Honorable Namuga.
I first of all appreciate you, Regan, and whoever has been listening to this engagement, whole conversation. And I want to, much as we all agree that when it comes to matters of the constitution to our country, it's at the discretion of Mr. Museveni and his colleagues to either abide or do what is within their means. But we all know that the three arms of government that we have, the legislature, judicial, and the executive, the separation of powers has ceased. The executive has taken over the two arms of government, and that is where the danger is arising. When you look at these three institutions, really, it was intentional in the constitution that once these are independent, could